The crack that split the winter silence sounded like a gunshot, and Ethan Norwood's eyes snapped open just in time to see the ceiling descending toward him in a cascade of timber and snow. He rolled from his bed with instincts honed by years of quick draws and quicker thinking, hitting the floor hard as the roof of his cabin collapsed inward with a thunderous roar. Snow poured through the gaping hole above, white and relentless, burying his bed, his table, half his supplies. The December wind howled through the opening like a vengeful spirit, and Ethan found himself pressed against the far wall, breathing hard, watching his home cave in around him. It was December 1882, and the winter had been brutal in the mountains near Leavenworth, Kansas. Ethan had come to these foothills seeking solitude after his time riding with cattle drives had worn thin. He had built this cabin with his own hands 6 months ago, but clearly he had underestimated just how much snow these Kansas hills could get when winter decided to show its teeth. He scrambled toward the door, boots crunching through the snow that now covered his floor. The main beam had split clean through, and half the roof sagged dangerously inward. His breath came in visible clouds as he yanked the door open and stumbled outside into knee-deep drifts. The landscape stretched white and endless before him, the nearest neighbor miles away. His horse whinnied nervously from the small stable he had built 30 yards from the cabin. Thank God that structure still stood. But his home, his shelter against the bitter cold, was effectively destroyed. Ethan stood there in his union suit and boots, snow falling on his bare head, and assessed the damage with a sinking heart. The temperature had to be well below freezing, and the sky promised more snow to come. He needed to salvage what he could, needed to figure out how to survive until he could either repair the cabin or make it to town. He had just turned to head for the stable to at least get his coat when he heard it, the sound of a horse approaching through the snow. Ethan's hand went instinctively to his hip, but he had left his gun belt inside, probably buried under 3 feet of snow and timber by now. The rider came into view through the swirling white, bundled in a heavy coat and scarf, sitting astride a sturdy Appaloosa that picked its way carefully through the drifts. As the figure drew closer, Ethan realized with some surprise that it was a woman. She pulled up a few yards away, her eyes moving from his half-dressed state to the collapsed cabin behind him. "Looks like you could use some help," she called out, her voice clear and strong despite the wind. Ethan crossed his arms against the cold, his pride warring with the very obvious fact that he was in no position to refuse assistance. "Roof gave way," he said, stating the obvious. "Appreciate the offer, but I can manage." The woman swung down from her horse with practiced ease, and even through her heavy winter gear, Ethan could tell she was younger than he had first thought, probably mid-20s to his 30 years. She unwrapped the scarf from her face, revealing features that were striking even red with cold, dark eyes that assessed the situation with an intelligence that suggested she was no stranger to hardship. "You can manage to freeze to death, maybe," she said, her tone matter-of-fact rather than mocking. "I'm Aurora Kimble. I have a ranch about 5 miles west of here, saw the smoke from your chimney disappear and figured something was wrong." "Ethan Norwood," he replied automatically, then glanced back at his ruined cabin. "I had a chimney about an hour ago." Aurora tied her horse next to his stable and started toward the cabin. "We need to get whatever supplies you can salvage out of there before the rest of the roof comes down." "You have any tools that survived?" "Should have some in the stable," Ethan said, already moving in that direction. The cold was seeping into his bones, and he knew she was right. Pride was a luxury he could not afford right now. He found his heavy coat and hat hanging where he had left them, along with his tool chest. When he emerged properly dressed this time, Aurora was already at the cabin door, peering inside with a critical eye. "The back corner looks stable enough," she observed. "If we are careful, we should be able to get in there and pull out your food stores, ammunition, anything else you need. But we need to move fast. That main beam is not going to hold much longer." They worked together in tense silence, wading through the snow inside the cabin to grab what they could. Aurora moved with confidence and efficiency, passing supplies out through the door while Ethan carried them to the stable. His spare clothes, his rifle and ammunition, 2 bags of flour that had stayed dry, salt pork, coffee, a few personal items he grabbed without thinking. They had just emerged with the last load when they heard the groan of timber giving way. Both of them broke into a run, and seconds later the rest of the roof came down with a crash that sent a wave of snow billowing outward. Ethan stood there breathing hard, watching what remained of his home collapse into rubble. 6 months of work, gone. He had faced down rustlers and survived stampedes, had weathered storms and droughts, but standing there watching his shelter disappear left him feeling more vulnerable than he had in years. "Come on," Aurora said, her hand touching his arm briefly. "You cannot stay here. My ranch has room and we can come back when the weather clears to see what can be salvaged." "I do not take charity," Ethan said stiffly. Aurora's eyes flashed. "Good, because I am not offering it. I am offering help, and there is a difference. You can work for your keep if your pride demands it, but standing here arguing about it while we both freeze is just foolish." She was right, and Ethan knew it. He nodded curtly and went to saddle his horse, a bay gelding he had named Copper. They loaded what supplies they could carry onto both horses, and then Aurora led the way west through the falling snow. The ride took over an hour, the wind picking up as they went, but Aurora seemed to know the terrain by heart. She led them along a route that followed a creek bed, providing some shelter from the worst of the weather. Ethan found himself watching her as they rode, noting the easy way she sat her horse, the confidence in every movement. This was not a woman who played at frontier life. She knew what she was doing out here. Finally, they crested a rise and Aurora's ranch came into view below. It was modest but well-maintained, a main house, a barn, a bunkhouse, and several corrals. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Ethan felt a rush of relief at the promise of warmth. A man emerged from the barn as they approached, older, his beard more gray than black. He looked at Ethan with the careful neutrality of someone used to evaluating strangers, then turned to Aurora. "Found him just in time, Tom," Aurora called out as they dismounted. "Roof caved in from the snow. This is Ethan Norwood. Ethan, this is Tom Henderson. He has worked this ranch since my father started it." Tom's expression softened slightly as he took Copper's reins. "Get inside and warm up. I will see to the horses." The interior of the house was blessedly warm, a fire crackling in a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. The main room served as kitchen and living space both, with 2 doors leading to what Ethan assumed were bedrooms. It was clean and organized, with none of the rough bachelor atmosphere of his own cabin. Aurora shed her outer layers and moved to the stove, where a pot of something that smelled amazing was simmering. "Coffee is hot," she said. "Sit down before you fall down." Ethan lowered himself into a chair at the table, suddenly aware of how exhausted he was. The adrenaline of the collapse was wearing off, leaving him drained. Aurora poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of him before taking the seat across from him. "How long have you been in these parts?" she asked. 6 months, give or take. "Built that cabin in summer, thought I had it sturdy enough." He wrapped his hands around the cup, letting the warmth seep in. "Guess I was wrong. This winter has been harder than most," Aurora said. "We have lost fencing, had to double up the stock in the barn because the south pasture is buried." "You could not have known the snow would be this heavy." "Your ranch," Ethan said, processing what she had said earlier. "Your father started it." Aurora's expression flickered, something sad crossing her face. "He died 2 years ago. Fever took him, left the place to me. Tom stayed on, and I have 2 other hands, brothers named Jack and Samuel Porter. They are in town picking up supplies, should be back tomorrow if the snow lets up." "I am sorry," Ethan said, meaning it. "About your father." She nodded, accepting the condolence, then changed the subject. "You said you built the cabin 6 months ago. What brought you up into the hills?" Ethan considered how much to share. "I spent 10 years working cattle drives, riding from Texas to Kansas and back again. Good work, but hard. I wanted to try my hand at something different, maybe do some trapping, hunt for gold if I got lucky. Mostly I wanted some quiet." "Find much gold?" Aurora asked, a hint of humor in her voice. "Not even a flake," Ethan admitted, "but the quiet was nice while it lasted." They talked through 2 cups of coffee each, the conversation easier than Ethan would have expected. Aurora was intelligent and straightforward, with a dry sense of humor that emerged when she relaxed. She told him about the ranch, how her father had claimed this land back in 1870, built it up from nothing. How she had learned to ride and rope before she could read. How she had fought to keep the ranch running after he died despite pressure from neighbors who thought a woman had no business running a spread alone. Tom came in eventually, stamping snow from his boots. "Horses are settled. Storm is getting worse. We might be snowed in for a few days." "Then it is good we have supplies," Aurora said. She turned to Ethan. "You can take the bunkhouse. It is not fancy, but it is warm and dry." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed in the bunkhouse, Ethan stared at the ceiling and took stock of his situation. He had lost his home but kept his life and most of his essential supplies. He was stranded at her ranch, run by a woman who had shown him more practical kindness in an afternoon than he had received in months. And if he was honest with himself, he was already drawn to Aurora Kimble in a way that had nothing to do with gratitude. He had noticed the way her hair, dark and thick, escaped from its braid in tendrils that framed her face. Had seen the strength in her hands, the intelligence in her eyes. She was beautiful, but it was more than that. There was something magnetic about her confidence, her competence, the way she moved through her world with purpose. It was a dangerous line of thinking, and Ethan pushed it away. He was here because of necessity, nothing more. As soon as the weather cleared, he would figure out his next step. Rebuild, maybe, or move on. But he would not complicate things by developing feelings for the woman who had saved his life. The storm lasted 3 days. During that time, Ethan made himself useful around the ranch, mucking stalls, repairing tack, splitting firewood. Tom was taciturn but fair, showing him where things were and what needed doing without making it feel like charity. They worked side by side in companionable silence, and Ethan found he appreciated the older man's steady presence. Aurora ran her ranch with quiet efficiency, checking on the livestock, managing supplies, planning for when her hired hands would return. Ethan found himself watching her more than he should, noticing little things. The way she hummed while she worked. How she always checked on the animals personally rather than sending Tom. The small smile that crossed her face when something pleased her. On the 3rd night, the snow finally stopped. They sat around the table after supper, Tom smoking his pipe while Aurora sketched out plans for spring planting. "Weather should clear enough in a day or 2 for us to ride back to your place," Aurora said without looking up from her paper. "See what can be salvaged, figure out if the cabin can be rebuilt or if you are starting from scratch." "I appreciate that," Ethan said. "I have been thinking, though. Might make more sense to just move on. Head to town, find work there until spring." Aurora's pencil stilled. "That is your choice, of course, but rebuilding is possible. The foundation should still be good, and if we can salvage the timber, you would mostly need materials for a new roof." "It is not just materials," Ethan said. "It is time, labor. I would be starting winter with no shelter, depending on charity." "There you go with that word again," Aurora said, finally looking up at him. Her eyes were direct, challenging. "I told you before, this is not charity. If you stay, you work. Tom could use help around here, and come spring, we will need extra hands for calving and branding. You work through winter, help us out, and in exchange you get a place to sleep and food to eat. Come spring, when the ground thaws, we help you rebuild properly. Everyone benefits." Tom pulled the pipe from his mouth. "She is not wrong. Winter is hard work around here, and Jack and Samuel are good boys but young. Could use someone with more experience." Ethan looked between them, seeing no pity in either face, only pragmatism. And if he was honest, the thought of leaving, of not seeing Aurora again after another day or two, sat heavy in his chest. "All right," he said finally, "through winter. But come spring, I pay you back for the building materials." Aurora's smile was quick and genuine. "Deal." 2 days later, when the sky cleared to a brittle blue and the temperature rose just enough to make travel feasible, Aurora and Ethan rode out to what remained of his cabin. The Jack and Samuel had returned the day before, 2 brothers in their early 20s who greeted Ethan with friendly curiosity and immediately accepted him as part of the ranch's winter crew. The cabin looked even worse in the clear light of day, a jumble of broken timber and compressed snow. They spent hours digging through the wreckage, salvaging what they could. His wood stove had survived, bent but functional. Much of the timber could be reused if they hauled it back to the ranch and let it dry properly. His few personal effects, a daguerreotype of his parents, a watch that had been his grandfather's, were recovered intact by some miracle. Aurora worked alongside him the entire time, never complaining about the cold or the heavy labor. At one point, as they were levering a particularly stubborn beam free, Ethan caught her looking at him with an expression he could not quite read. "What?" he asked. "Just thinking," she said, refocusing on the beam. "You built this yourself. The construction is good. My father would have approved. It was just bad luck with the snow." "Thanks," Ethan said, oddly pleased by the compliment. "Your father taught you about building." "He taught me about everything," Aurora said, and there was both pride and sadness in her voice. "He always said that running a ranch meant knowing every part of it, from the books to the branding. He never treated me like I was less capable because I was a girl." "Sounds like he was a smart man." "The smartest I ever knew," Aurora agreed. They got the beam free and added it to the growing pile of salvaged wood. "I miss him every day, but I think he would be proud that I kept the ranch going." "I think you are right," Ethan said, and meant it. They loaded everything they could onto a borrowed wagon and made the trip back to the ranch as the sun was setting. Over supper that night, Jack entertained them with an exaggerated story about a card game in town that had Samuel rolling his eyes and interjecting corrections. Tom listened with the patience of someone who had heard countless such stories, and Aurora laughed, the sound bright and unguarded. Ethan felt something shift in his chest as he sat there, part of this makeshift family dinner. It had been a long time since he had belonged anywhere, since he had sat at a table surrounded by people who seemed to genuinely enjoy each other's company. He had spent so many years drifting, moving from job to job, town to town, that he had forgotten what this felt like. His eyes met Aurora's across the table, and for a moment the conversation faded into background noise. She smiled at him, small and soft, and Ethan felt his heart do something complicated. He was in trouble, he realized. Despite his best intentions, despite knowing better, he was falling for Aurora Kimble. The winter settled into a rhythm. Ethan rose before dawn each day, working alongside Tom and the Porter brothers to keep the ranch running through the brutal cold. They fed livestock, broke ice on water troughs, repaired equipment, and did 100 other tasks that winter on a ranch demanded. The work was hard but satisfying, and Ethan found himself thriving on it. Aurora was everywhere, working as hard as any of them. She was up before anyone else, making breakfast in the dark hours before dawn, then out checking on the animals, overseeing repairs, planning for spring. She kept the books for the ranch in a ledger she guarded carefully, and once a week she sat at the table working on accounts while Ethan and Tom played cards nearby. They fell into an easy partnership, Ethan and Aurora. She sought his opinion on ranch matters, respecting his years of experience even when she disagreed with his conclusions. He learned to read her moods, knowing when to push and when to let things be. They talked for hours about everything and nothing, discovering shared opinions on some things and arguing cheerfully about others. It was Tom who first commented on it, one afternoon when they were alone in the barn mending tack. "You are good for her," he said without preamble. Ethan looked up startled. "Sir, Miss Aurora," Tom clarified, his hands never pausing in their work. "She has been alone since her father passed, really alone in the ways that matter, carrying this whole place on her shoulders with just me and a couple of boys to help. It has been hard on her. But since you came, she seems lighter, happy." "She is an impressive woman," Ethan said carefully. Tom's eyes were knowing. "That she is, and she deserves someone who sees that, who does not try to change her or take what is hers, just something to think on." Ethan thought about little else for the rest of the day. He had been trying so hard not to presume, not to overstep, that he had not considered whether Aurora might feel something too. But now that Tom had planted the seed, Ethan found himself watching for signs. The way Aurora's face lit up when he walked into a room, how she always saved the seat next to her for him at meals, the casual touches that had become more frequent, her hand on his arm, her shoulder brushing his. The way she looked at him sometimes, when she thought he was not paying attention, with an expression that made his breath catch. Christmas came, and Aurora insisted on a proper celebration despite it being just the 5 of them. She cooked a feast, roasted chicken and potatoes and pie made from preserved apples. They exchanged small gifts, practical things mostly. Tom gave her a new pair of leather gloves he had made himself. The Porter brothers pooled their money for fancy coffee. Ethan had carved her a small box from a piece of salvaged wood from his cabin, spending weeks on it in secret, fitting it with a tiny latch. When Aurora opened it, her eyes went wide. "Ethan, this is beautiful. For your important papers," he said, feeling suddenly shy. "Or whatever you want to keep safe." She looked up at him, and the expression on her face made his heart pound. "Thank you," she said softly. "I will treasure it." That night, after the others had gone to bed, Ethan and Aurora sat by the fire, the only light in the room. They had fallen into the habit of these late-night conversations, just the two of them, talking until the fire burned low. "This was a good Christmas," Aurora said, holding her hands out to the warmth. "Better than the last 2 years. Better than any I've had in a long while," Ethan admitted. "I usually spent them in some bunkhouse or camp, just another day." Aurora turned to look at him, her face serious in the firelight. "I am glad you are here, Ethan. I know the circumstances were not ideal, but I am glad your path brought you to us, to me." The vulnerability in her voice, the openness, gave Ethan courage. "Aurora, I need to tell you something." She waited, her dark eyes steady on his. "I came here planning to stay just until I could figure out my next move," Ethan said, choosing his words carefully. "But somewhere along the way that changed. Working this ranch with you, talking to you, just being near you, it has all started to mean something to me. You have started to mean something to me." Aurora's breath caught. "Ethan." "I know I do not have much to offer," he continued, needing to get it all out. "I am a drifter who lost his home, working on your ranch for room and board. But I am falling in love with you, Aurora, and I needed you to know." For a moment she just stared at him, and Ethan felt his heart sink. He had misread this, had let Tom's words and his own wishful thinking convince him of something that was not there. Then Aurora moved, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. It was soft at first, tentative, but when Ethan responded, pulling her closer, it deepened into something that spoke of longing and need and feelings too long suppressed. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Aurora rested her forehead against his. "I have been waiting for you to say something," she whispered. "Hoping you felt it too. Ethan, I have been falling in love with you since the day you stood in the snow and watched your home collapse, but still had the pride to tell me you did not need help." Ethan laughed, the sound shaky with relief and joy. "I was such a fool." "You were," Aurora agreed, but she was smiling. "But you are my fool now if you want to be." "There is nothing I want more," Ethan said, and kissed her again. They sat by the fire until it died to embers, wrapped in each other's arms, talking about the future in whispers. Aurora told him about her dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, maybe adding sheep. Ethan shared his own hopes, building a proper home, having land of his own again, but staying close, always staying close to her. "Come spring, we will rebuild your cabin properly," Aurora said. "But Ethan, I do not want you living up there alone anymore. I want you here with me." "You are sure?" Ethan asked. "People will talk, an unmarried woman and a man." Aurora pulled back to look at him, one eyebrow raised. "Was that your awkward way of proposing?" Ethan blinked, then laughed. "I suppose it was. Aurora Kimble, will you marry me?" "Yes," she said simply. "Absolutely yes." "But we wait until spring. I want a real wedding with people from town and flowers and everything proper." "Whatever you want," Ethan promised. "I would wait forever for you." "Let us not wait that long," Aurora said, and kissed him again. January and February passed in a blur of work and stolen moments. They kept their engagement quiet, wanting to announce it properly, but Tom figured it out within days and the Porter brothers shortly after. All three gave their blessings readily, Tom clapping Ethan on the shoulder with clear approval. The ranch work continued, harder as the temperatures dropped to brutal levels. They lost 2 calves to the cold despite their best efforts, and a section of the barn roof needed emergency repairs when ice caused it to sag dangerously. But through it all, Ethan and Aurora faced each challenge together, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. They talked late into every night, learning each other in ways that went beyond the physical. Aurora told him about her mother, who had died giving birth to a brother who had not survived either, leaving Aurora and her father alone when she was just 8. She shared her fears about the ranch, about failing, about not being strong enough or smart enough to keep her father's legacy alive. Ethan listened and understood, sharing his own losses. His parents had died of cholera when he was 16, leaving him alone in the world. He had drifted for years, never putting down roots, never letting anyone get close. He had thought he wanted solitude, but really he had just been afraid of losing anyone else he cared about. "I am afraid too," he admitted one night. "Afraid that something will happen, that I will lose you like I lost everyone else." "You will not lose me," Aurora said fiercely. "I am not going anywhere and neither are you. We are building something here, Ethan, something strong enough to last. He believed her, wanted to believe her with everything in him. March came, bringing the first signs of thaw. The snow began to recede, revealing brown grass and muddy ground. The ranch came alive with spring work, the chaos of calving season keeping them all busy from dawn until long after dark. Aurora and Ethan worked side by side, delivering calves, mending fences that had succumbed to winter damage, moving cattle to fresh pasture. It was during this time that they rode into Leavenworth to announce their engagement and make arrangements for the wedding. The town had grown since Ethan had last been there. More buildings, more people. Aurora clearly knew everyone, greeting storekeepers and townsfolk by name as they made their way to the church. Reverend James listened to their request with a warm smile. "I remember your father, Miss Kimble. He would be pleased to see you so happy." "May 15th, you said. That should work fine." They sent telegrams to the few relatives Aurora had scattered across the country, though she warned Ethan not to expect many to make the journey. They ordered supplies for a reception at the ranch, and Aurora bought fabric for a dress from the general store, her excitement contagious. Word spread quickly through town, and Ethan found himself on the receiving end of much scrutiny from neighbors who clearly cared about Aurora and wanted to make sure this drifter was good enough for her. He bore it all with patience, understanding their protectiveness, trying to prove through his words and actions that his intentions were honorable. Old Mrs. Fletcher, who ran the boarding house, pulled him aside as they were leaving the general store. "You hurt that girl and you will answer to me and every other person in this town," she said, her wrinkled face stern. "I would never hurt her," Ethan said seriously. "I would die first." Mrs. Fletcher's expression softened. "I believe you, young man. You have good eyes, honest eyes. Take care of our Aurora." "With my life," Ethan promised. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, both of them giddy with the reality of what they had set in motion. In 2 months they would be married. In 2 months, Aurora would officially be his wife, and he would have a family again. April brought warmer weather and the hard work of rebuilding. True to her word, Aurora organized a work party to rebuild Ethan's cabin properly. Tom and the Porter brothers joined them, along with several neighbors who came to help, curious about Aurora's fiancé and willing to lend hands to the project. Over the course of 3 weeks, working every moment they could spare from ranch duties, they built a new cabin on the foundation of the old. This time, Ethan designed it with what he had learned, the roof reinforced and pitched steep to shed snow, the walls chinked properly against wind and cold. It was bigger than before, with a separate bedroom and real glass windows that Aurora insisted on buying. "You will need a proper home," she said, when Ethan protested the expense. "This is going to be where we come when we want privacy, our own little place even though we will live in the main house." The thought of having this cabin as a retreat, a place just for them, made Ethan's chest tight with emotion. He had never had anything that felt this permanent, this real. On the last day of construction, as they were fitting the final shingles to the roof, Aurora climbed up to join him. The view from up there was spectacular, rolling hills and distant mountains, spring green spreading across the landscape. "It is beautiful," Aurora said, settling next to him carefully. "You did good work, Ethan." "We did good work," he corrected, putting an arm around her. "I could not have done any of this without you." "Sure you could have," Aurora said, "but I am glad you did not have to." They sat there as the sun set, watching the sky turn orange and pink and purple, his future wife in his arms and a home they had built together beneath them. Ethan had never felt more at peace, more certain that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The day of the wedding dawned clear and warm, a perfect Kansas spring day. Ethan stood in the church, Tom beside him as his best man, and watched Aurora's uncle walk her down the aisle. She was radiant in her cream-colored dress, flowers from the ranch braided into her dark hair, her eyes locked on his. Reverend James performed the ceremony with warmth and dignity, his words about partnership and love and commitment resonating deeply. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke from the heart. "Aurora, you saved my life when my cabin collapsed, but you did so much more than that. You gave me a home, a purpose, and a love I never thought I would find. I promise to stand beside you always, to be your partner in everything, to love you with all that I am for all the days I have." Aurora's eyes were bright with tears as she spoke her own vows. "Ethan, you came into my life when I had almost forgotten what it felt like to not be alone. You saw me not as a woman playing at ranching, but as an equal partner. You gave me laughter and love and hope for the future. I promise to build a life with you, to face every challenge at your side, to love you through every season of our lives together." When Reverend James pronounced them husband and wife, the small church erupted in cheers. Ethan kissed his wife, his Aurora, and felt like the luckiest man alive. The reception at the ranch was a joyful affair, neighbors and townspeople filling the yard, eating and drinking and celebrating. Tom gave a short, touching speech about watching Aurora grow up and seeing her find happiness. Jack and Samuel provided music, Jack on fiddle and Samuel on guitar, and couples danced as the evening turned to night. Ethan danced with his wife, holding her close, marveling at the fact that she was his now, officially and completely. "Happy?" he asked. "Happier than I have ever been," Aurora said, resting her head on his shoulder. "This is everything I wanted, Ethan. You are everything I wanted." "I feel the same," he murmured into her hair. "I love you so much." "I love you too," Aurora whispered back. They spent their wedding night in the rebuilt cabin, alone at last. It was everything Ethan had hoped for, tender and passionate and perfect. Afterwards, lying in bed with Aurora in his arms, he stared at the ceiling he had built and felt overwhelmed by gratitude. "What are you thinking?" Aurora asked sleepily. "That when that roof caved in last December, I thought I had lost everything," Ethan said. "But really, that was when I found everything that mattered." Aurora tilted her head up to kiss him. "I was thinking the same thing. That storm brought you to me." "Best storm of my life," Ethan said, and they both laughed. Summer came, and with it the full rhythm of ranch life. Ethan worked alongside Aurora and their hired hands, learning the quirks of her herd, the particulars of her land. He brought his own knowledge to bear, suggesting improvements based on techniques he had learned in his cattle drive days. Together, they made decisions about where to graze, when to sell, what to keep. The ranch thrived under their joint management. Aurora's careful planning combined with Ethan's practical experience created a partnership that was more effective than either of them alone. Neighbors noticed, commenting on how good the Kimble place looked, how healthy the stock was. Ethan officially changed his name, becoming Ethan Kimble Norwood in the town records, wanting to honor Aurora's father's legacy while keeping his own family name. Aurora was touched by the gesture, seeing it as the respect for her history that it was. They established routines, patterns to their days that felt comfortable and right. Mornings started with coffee and planning the day's work. Days were filled with the endless tasks of ranching. Evenings were for sitting on the porch of the main house, watching the sun set, talking about everything and nothing. Nights were for love and laughter, for learning each other's bodies and souls in the privacy of their bedroom. It was not always easy. They had their disagreements, their moments of frustration. Aurora could be stubborn, convinced her way was right. Ethan could be proud, resistant to asking for help even when he needed it. But they learned to navigate these rough patches, to talk through problems instead of letting them fester. In August, they took on 2 more hired hands, brothers recommended by Tom who needed work. The ranch was growing, the herd expanding, and they needed the extra labor. Ethan took charge of training the new men, finding that he enjoyed the teaching aspect, passing on what he knew. Aurora managed the business side with increasing confidence, negotiating prices for their cattle that had even the most seasoned ranchers raising their eyebrows in respect. She was building a reputation as a shrewd businesswoman, and Ethan could not have been prouder. That fall, as they prepared for winter, Ethan found himself thinking about the previous year, about standing in the snow watching his cabin collapse. It felt like a lifetime ago, like something that had happened to a different person. That Ethan had been alone, adrift, uncertain of his place in the world. This Ethan was a husband, a partner, a man who knew exactly where he belonged. One evening in late October, as they were checking on the herd in the north pasture, Aurora stopped her horse and dismounted. Ethan followed suit, concerned, but she was smiling. "What is it?" he asked. Aurora took his hands in hers, her expression joyful and a little nervous. "I am pregnant," she said simply. "We are going to have a baby." Ethan felt like all the air had left his lungs. "You are sure?" "As sure as I can be without seeing a doctor, but yes, I am sure. I have all the signs. The baby should come in late spring, around May or June." Ethan swept her into his arms, holding her tight, his heart so full it felt like it might burst. "A baby," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "We are going to have a family." "We already have a family," Aurora said, but she was crying happy tears. "But yes, we are going to make it bigger." They told Tom that night, and the old cowboy actually got misty-eyed, congratulating them both with genuine warmth. The Porter brothers were excited, already planning to teach the baby to ride as soon as it could walk. Word spread through the ranch and then to town, and they were inundated with well wishes and advice. Aurora continued working through the fall and into winter, though Ethan fussed over her constantly, trying to get her to take it easy. She laughed at his worrying but let him help more, accepting his need to protect her and the child she carried. Winter came again, but this time Ethan faced it with confidence and joy. The cabin roof held firm under the snow. The ranch was prepared, with ample feed stored and shelters reinforced. And every night, Ethan fell asleep with his hand on Aurora's growing belly, feeling their child move, marveling at the miracle of it. They talked endlessly about the future, about names and plans and dreams. Would it be a boy or girl? Would they have Aurora's dark hair or Ethan's lighter brown? Would the child love ranching as they did or want something different? "I hope they want the ranch," Aurora admitted one night. "I want to pass this on, keep it in the family the way my father wanted." "Whatever they want, we will support them," Ethan said. "But I think they will love it." How could they not, growing up here? Spring came early in 1884, the snow melting sooner than expected. Aurora was huge by April, uncomfortable and ready to be done being pregnant. Ethan was a nervous wreck, jumping at every wince and expression, convinced the baby was coming constantly. On May 10th, 2 weeks before her calculated due date, Aurora went into labor. It was a long, difficult birth, lasting through the night and into the next day. Ethan stayed with her the whole time, holding her hand, supporting her, terrified and awed by her strength. When the baby finally came, a lusty cry filling the room, the midwife from town announced, "It is a boy, a healthy, strong boy." Ethan looked at his son, small and red and perfect, and felt tears streaming down his face. Aurora reached for the baby, exhausted but radiant, and when the midwife placed him in her arms, both parents just stared in wonder. "He is beautiful," Aurora whispered. "Perfect. He is," Ethan agreed, touching one tiny hand with a careful finger. "What should we call him?" They had discussed names endlessly but never settled on anything. Now, looking at their son, Aurora said, "What about Robert, after my father? Robert Thomas with Thomas after Tom." "Robert Thomas Kimble Norwood," Ethan said, testing it out. "It is perfect. He would have loved that." Tom, when they told him, broke down completely, honored beyond words. He held little Robert with practiced ease, cooing at the baby with a tenderness that made them all emotional. The first months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Robert was a good baby, healthy and strong, but the sleepless nights took their toll. Ethan and Aurora took turns with feedings and diaper changes, both of them learning as they went, making mistakes and laughing about them later. The ranch work continued because it had to, but they managed. Tom and the hired hand stepped up, taking on extra duties without being asked. Neighbors brought food and hand-me-down baby clothes, the community rallying around them as they adjusted to being new parents. Ethan would never forget the first time Robert smiled at him, a real smile at about 6 weeks old. Or the first time the baby laughed, a delighted gurgle that had both parents grinning like fools. Every milestone felt momentous, every day a gift. That summer, they had a photographer come out from town to take a family portrait. The three of them sat together, Aurora holding Robert, Ethan standing behind her with his hand on her shoulder. When they received the finished photograph weeks later, Aurora framed it and hung it over the fireplace, next to the one of her parents. "Our family," she said, looking at the photographs together. "Complete." "For now," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "But I would not mind another one in a year or two." Aurora leaned back against him. "I think I would like that too." The seasons cycled on, bringing change and growth. Robert grew from baby to toddler, walking at 10 months and talking early, proving to have his mother's intelligence and his father's stubbornness. He loved the ranch, loved the animals, was utterly fearless on horseback by the time he was 3. In the fall of 1886, Aurora became pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and she carried right through the winter and into spring without much difficulty. Their daughter, Ellen Marie, was born on April 3, 1887, a sunny spring day that felt like a celebration. Ellen was different from Robert, quieter, more thoughtful. She had Aurora's dark eyes and Ethan's lighter hair, an interesting combination that made for a striking child. Robert was instantly protective of his little sister, always wanting to help care for her, to show her things. The ranch continued to prosper. They added more land, buying an adjacent property when the owner decided to sell and move east. They built a larger barn, expanded the herd, hired more hands. Ethan and Aurora's partnership deepened with every passing year, their love maturing into something solid and unshakable. There were hard times, too. They lost cattle to disease one year, nearly a quarter of the herd. A drought the summer Robert turned 5 tested them all, forcing them to haul water from miles away. Tom died in 1889, passing peacefully in his sleep at 72, and they mourned him deeply, burying him on a hill overlooking the ranch he had loved. But they weathered it all together, Aurora and Ethan, side by side as they had promised. Their marriage was their foundation, strong enough to support everything they built upon it. In 1890, Aurora became pregnant once more, a surprise but a welcome one. Samuel Peter was born that November, a tiny baby who looked like a miniature version of Ethan. Robert and Ellen doted on their baby brother, and the house was filled with the joyful chaos of 3 children. The ranch became known as one of the best-run operations in the region. People came from other counties to buy breeding stock, trusting the Kimble Norwood name. Aurora was sought out for advice by other ranchers, her business acumen respected even by men who initially dismissed her because of her gender. Ethan trained a generation of young cowboys, teaching them not just ranching skills but honor and hard work. The children grew up surrounded by love and purpose. Robert proved to have a gift for handling horses, gentling even the most difficult animals with patience and skill. Ellen was their reader, devouring every book they could get her, talking about maybe becoming a teacher someday. Samuel was still too young to show his interests clearly, but he loved being outside, was happiest when covered in dirt from some adventure. The cabin that Ethan had rebuilt remained their special place. Sometimes, when they could steal a few hours away from ranch and children, they would ride up there and spend the afternoon alone. They would sit on the porch and remember that first year, the winter when everything changed, when Aurora found Ethan in the snow and their story began. "Do you ever regret it?" Ethan asked one afternoon in 1895 as they sat watching the sun set from that familiar porch. "Taking in a stranger, tying your life to mine," Aurora looked at him like he was crazy. "Not for one single second. Ethan, you are the best decision I ever made. This life we have built together, it is everything I could have wanted and so much more." "I feel the same," Ethan said, pulling her close. "When that roof caved in, when I thought I had lost everything, I could not have imagined this. That I would find you, that we would have this family, this life. Sometimes I wake up and have to remind myself it is real." "It is real," Aurora said, kissing him. "It is all very real, and it is ours." By 1898, Robert was 13 and already talking about taking over the ranch someday. Ellen was 10, still talking about teaching but also showing an interest in the business side of the ranch, poring over the account books with her mother. Samuel, at 7, remained their wild child, always getting into something, keeping them on their toes. Ethan was 46 now, Aurora 43, and they had been married for 13 years. The ranch employed 15 men full-time, covered 3,000 acres, and ran 500 head of cattle plus horses. They had built something remarkable, something lasting. One evening, as they were sitting on the porch of the main house watching their children play in the yard, Aurora rested her head on Ethan's shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me the night you proposed?" she asked. "I said a lot of things that night," Ethan replied with a smile. "You said you would wait forever for me," Aurora said, "but we did not have to wait at all, did we? We just had to find each other." "Through a blizzard and a collapsed roof," Ethan added. "Not the most conventional beginning." "Nothing about us has ever been conventional," Aurora said. "And I would not change a thing." "Neither would I," Ethan said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. The years continued to unfold, each one bringing new challenges and joys. Robert took on more responsibility around the ranch, proving himself a natural leader. Ellen did indeed become a teacher, opening a small school in town while still helping with the ranch on weekends. Samuel found his calling in horses, breeding and training them with a skill that rivaled his older brothers. Ethan and Aurora grew older together, gray threading through their hair, lines deepening on their faces, but their love never diminished. If anything, it grew stronger, tempered by shared experiences and weathered storms, by children raised and a life built together. They became grandparents in 1905, when Robert married a girl from town named Lucy, and they had a daughter, Clara. The joy of holding that first grandchild, of seeing their son become a father, was indescribable. More grandchildren followed, Ellen giving them 2 grandsons, Samuel a daughter. The ranch passed naturally to the next generation, Robert taking over day-to-day operations while Ethan and Aurora advised and supported. They remained active, still working when they could, still invested in the place they had built together. On their 30th wedding anniversary in 1915, their children threw them a party that included what seemed like half the county. Ethan and Aurora stood together, surrounded by children and grandchildren and friends, and reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. "I was thinking," Ethan said as they danced together just as they had at their wedding, "about that winter, about how cold I was standing in that snow watching my roof collapse." "I remember," Aurora said. "You looked so stubborn, insisting you did not need help." "I did need help," Ethan said. "I needed you, even though I did not know it yet. You saved me, Aurora, in every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Aurora corrected gently. "I was alone too, Ethan, lonely in ways I did not even recognize. You gave me partnership, love, a true partner in every sense. We built this life together, every bit of it." "Together," Ethan agreed, kissing her softly. "Always together." As they grew older still, into their 60s and then 70s, they slowed down but never stopped. They spent long hours on the porch, watching the ranch they had built continue to thrive under their children's management. They told stories to their grandchildren about the old days, about the winter the cabin roof caved in, and how it had been the beginning of everything. Those grandchildren would sit rapt, listening to tales of hard work and determination, of love found in unexpected places, of building something from nothing. The story of their grandparents' meeting became family legend, told and retold with affection and pride. Ethan and Aurora took trips to the rebuilt cabin often, spending quiet days there remembering, celebrating, simply being together. The cabin had become a symbol for them, a reminder of where they had started and how far they had come. In the spring of 1923, Aurora became ill. It started as a cough that would not go away and progressed into something the doctor could not quite identify. Ethan was beside himself with worry, but Aurora faced it with her characteristic strength. "We have had a good life," she told him one day as he sat by her bedside in the room they had shared for nearly 40 years. "The best life. I have no regrets, Ethan." "You are not allowed to talk like that," Ethan said fiercely, holding her hand. "You are going to beat this." She did, through sheer determination and Ethan's unwavering care. By summer she was on her feet again, weaker but alive, and Ethan thanked God for every additional day he had with her. They grew old together, into their 70s, and then 80s, fixtures in the community, beloved by generations who had grown up knowing their story. They were proof that love could last, that partnership could endure, that two people who found each other could build something remarkable. On a clear spring day in 1929, Ethan and Aurora rode out to their cabin one more time. They were both in their late 70s now, moving slowly, but determined. They sat on the porch, hand in hand, looking out over land they had worked and loved for decades. "Do you remember what I told you that first night after we got engaged?" Aurora asked. "That we were building something strong enough to last." "I remember," Ethan said. "And you were right. Look at what we have created, not just the ranch, but the family, the legacy. It is going to go on long after we are gone." "Robert is a good steward of the land," Aurora agreed. "Ellen and Samuel too, in their own ways. We raised them right." "We did," Ethan said with satisfaction. "We did a lot of things right, you and I." They sat in comfortable silence as the sun moved across the sky, content just to be together. After a while, Aurora spoke again. "I love you, Ethan Norwood. I have loved you from that first day when you were too proud to admit you needed help, and I will love you until the day I die and beyond." "I love you too, Aurora Kimble," Ethan said, using her maiden name as he sometimes did, honoring the woman she had been when they met. "You are the best thing that ever happened to me. This life we have built, this family, it is all because you helped me dig out from under that snow and start rebuilding." "We rebuilt together," Aurora said. "We have always done everything together." "Always," Ethan agreed. They returned to the ranch as the sun was setting, greeted by children and grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren now. Their family had grown beyond anything they could have imagined that first winter, branches spreading from the strong foundation they had laid together. Ethan and Aurora lived to see their 60th wedding anniversary in 1935, a milestone celebrated by everyone who knew them. They were 93 and 90 respectively, remarkable ages for the time, but they were both still sharp, still present, still deeply in love. When Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep in 1936, just shy of his 94th birthday, Aurora was beside him as she had been for over 50 years. She held his hand and told him she loved him, and when his eyes closed for the last time, there was a smile on his face. Aurora lived another 2 years without him, surrounded by the family they had created, sustained by the legacy they had built. She spoke often of Ethan, keeping his memory alive, telling stories of their life together to anyone who would listen. When she passed away in the spring of 1938, it was in the same bed, in the same room in the house where they had raised their children and built their life. Her last words were reported to be, "I am coming, Ethan. Wait for me." They were buried side by side on the hill overlooking the ranch, next to Tom and other beloved friends who had passed before them. Their headstone was simple, bearing their names, dates, and a single line. Together they built a life worth living. The ranch continued on, passed down through generations of Kimble Norwoods, each one raised on the story of how it all began. The story of a man who lost his home in a blizzard and a woman who helped him dig out and start rebuilding. The story of two people who found love in the most unexpected way and built it into something that lasted not just a lifetime, but generations. The cabin remained standing, maintained carefully by the family as a memorial and a reminder. Couples would go there on anniversaries. Proposals were made on that porch. Children were brought to hear the story of their ancestors, who had met in that very spot during the worst winter in memory. The Kimble Norwood Ranch became legendary in Kansas, known for quality stock and quality people, for treating employees fairly and honoring commitments. It was said that the love Ethan and Aurora had built into the foundation of the place could still be felt, that it infused everything the family did. Their great-great-grandchildren, living well into the 21st century, would tell the story with pride, showing old photographs and letters, keeping the memory alive. The story of a roof that caved in from heavy snow, of a woman who helped a stranger dig out and start rebuilding, and how that act of kindness became one of the great love stories of the American West. Because in the end, that was what it was, a love story. Two people who found each other against all odds, who chose each other every single day, who built a life and a legacy that endured long after they were gone. A testament to the power of love, partnership, and the simple act of helping someone when they need it most. Ethan and Aurora's story became more than just family history. It became a reminder that sometimes the worst moments in life, the moments when everything seems to fall apart, can actually be the beginning of something extraordinary. That accepting help is not weakness but wisdom. That love can be found in the most unexpected places and times. That two people working together can accomplish more than either could alone. The blizzard that had brought them together, the collapsed roof that had seemed like a disaster, had actually been the greatest gift. Because it had led Ethan to Aurora and Aurora to Ethan, and together they had built something beautiful, something lasting, something worth remembering and celebrating for generations to come. Their love story, born in snow and hardship, nurtured through work and partnership, and sustained by mutual respect and deep affection, proved that the best foundations are built not in perfect conditions, but in adversity overcome together. That helping someone dig out from disaster can lead to building something neither could have created alone. And in that truth, in that simple story of a roof that caved in and two people who rebuilt not just a cabin but an entire life together, lay a lesson that transcended time and place. Love, true love, is not about perfection or ease. It is about showing up when things are hard, about digging out together, about rebuilding side by side. It is about choosing each other every day through every season until the very end. Ethan and Aurora understood that, lived it, and left behind a legacy that proved it true. Their story would be told for as long as there were Kimble Norwoods to tell it, a testament to love found, built, and sustained through a lifetime of partnership. A love story for the ages, born in the Wild West, forged in hardship, and lasting far beyond their time.